The boardroom fell silent. 39 executives in tailored suits stared at the projected image, a street photo of a man blending fresh fruit juice at a busy city intersection. Someone laughed nervously. Then the new company owner walked in. Gasps swallowed the room whole. It was him. Atlanta had a way of humbling you in the morning. By 7:22 a.m., the intersection of Peachtree Street and North Avenue had already become everything Atlanta traffic was famous for: a beautiful, chaotic, horn-filled standstill that moved in inches and tested the patience of every soul trapped inside it. Rideshare drivers muttered at their GPS screens. Commuters sipped drive-through coffee. A woman in a white BMW reapplied her lipstick in the rearview mirror like she had nowhere better to be. And then there was Marcus. He stood at the edge of the sidewalk beside a clean stainless steel cart, professional but simple, the kind you'd see outside a health food festival. On it sat a commercial blender, a stacked row of colorful bottled juices: watermelon, pineapple, soursop, mango ginger, a bed of fresh whole fruits arranged like a still life painting, and a small chalkboard sign that read, "Marcus's Pure, Real Fruit, Real Energy, $6. He wore a fitted white t-shirt, clean dark jeans, fresh white sneakers, and a simple gold chain that caught the morning light just enough to notice, but not enough to question. His beard was shaped clean. His locks were pulled back neatly. He looked to anyone who passed like a man who took care of himself, a hustler in the most dignified sense of the word. "Good morning. Watermelon mint, pineapple ginger." "What are we starting the day with?" he called out, voice carrying the kind of warmth that doesn't need a microphone. A man in a Lexus rolled his window down. "What's the mango situation?" "Mango ginger. Fresh cut this morning. I'll blend it right in front of you. Say less. Give me two." Marcus smiled, dropped the mango chunks and a thumb of ginger into the blender, hit the button, and 30 seconds later handed across two perfectly filled bottles, capped and clean. The man handed him a 20 and told him to keep it. "God bless you, man," Marcus said, and meant it. This was his morning, Monday through Saturday. Rain or shine, sun or stubborn Atlanta humidity. He was at that cart by 7, locked in until about noon, moving through the traffic like a man on a mission he'd assigned himself. The other vendors at the intersection knew him simply as Mark. He was the one who remembered names, the one who asked Jerome, the older man who sold newspapers 3 lights down, how his knee surgery went. The one who bought lunch for the young woman selling bottled water on Fridays because he'd once overheard her tell a customer she hadn't eaten since the day before. He wasn't loud about any of it. He just did it, the way good people do things quietly, without an audience, without a record of it. What none of them knew, what almost nobody in Atlanta knew, was that Marcus Dion Williams was worth approximately $340 million. He was 41 years old, methodical, self-made in the most literal sense of the phrase. He had founded Pure Origin Beverages at 29 with a $4,000 investment, a rented kitchen, and a recipe his grandmother had kept in a spiral notebook since 1978. That same company now had national distribution, sat on shelves in Whole Foods, Kroger, and Target across 23 states, and had just landed a partnership deal with a major airline to supply premium drinks on domestic flights. But Pure Origin was only the beginning. There was Dion Digital, a tech consultancy that built custom software for mid-sized businesses and had clients in 9 cities. There was Cornerstone Real Estate Group, which managed commercial and residential properties across Atlanta, Charlotte, and Houston. There was a stake in a black-owned investment fund he'd quietly seeded 3 years ago. And then there was the one closest to home, Apex Auto Group, a premium car dealership and full-service automobile company with 4 locations across Georgia, nearly 260 employees, and a reputation in the industry for excellence. 260 employees, several of whom were his boys from Morehouse. They had been 6 of them once, the kind of college friends that feel less like circumstance and more like destiny. 6 young black men from different corners of the country who had ended up in the same dorm hallway freshman year at Morehouse College and never quite separated after that. They called their group chat, started years later when smartphones made it inevitable, the Morehouse 6. Marcus had been the quiet one, the one who spent weekends reading business books while the others hit the yard, the one who talked about his grandmother's juice like it was scripture, the one they liked but perhaps never fully understood, because ambition that moves in silence is often mistaken for stillness. By their late 30s, four of the five others had found their way through different paths, different detours into management positions at Apex Auto Group. Good salaries, company benefits, titles they were proud of. They believed they had arrived, and in many ways they had. Not one of them knew who sat at the invisible top of the chain that signed their paychecks. The photograph that started everything landed in the Morehouse 6 at 8:47 on a Tuesday night. Deshawn's sales director at Apex's Buckhead location, part-time comedian in his own estimation, had been sitting in traffic on Peachtree that morning when he spotted the cart. He'd done a double take sharp enough to strain something. Then he'd grabbed his phone, zoomed in from inside his Audi, and taken the shot without rolling down his window. The caption read, "Bruh, is that not Marcus? Selling juice on the street?" The replies hit like dominoes. "No way. No way, bro, fell off bad. Someone check on him for real. I thought he had some little business going. What happened? Somebody drop a cash app. We gotta help, homie. The locks and everything, Mark. What happened to you, King?" Marcus's name was tagged. His read receipts were on. The double blue ticks appeared within minutes. He read every word. Then he set his phone down on his kitchen counter, poured himself a glass of his own soursop blend, and stood at his floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Atlanta skyline, a view from the 31st floor that had cost him more per month than most people earned in a year. He was not angry. He was not hurt. He was, if anything, a little tired. Not the tired that breaks a man, the tired that clarifies him. The kind that arrives when you realize the people laughing at you have been doing so for years, and the ground beneath your feet has never once shifted because of it. He took a slow sip, set the glass down, and smiled the same smile he wore at the cart every morning. The sixth man in the group was Kendrick Lawson. He had not replied to a single message in the thread. He lay on his couch that same Tuesday night, staring at the ceiling, phone on his chest, Deshawn's photo still open on his screen. He was the quietest of the group, a regional operations manager at Apex's Decatur branch, thoughtful in ways the others sometimes mistook for distance. And unlike the others, the image of Marcus at that cart didn't make him want to laugh. It made him want to do something. He opened his banking app, looked at his savings, thought about what he could realistically pull together without breaking himself, maybe $3,000, maybe $3,500 if he moved some things around. Enough to help a man get a real commercial kitchen. Enough to help him bottle something properly and approach a few local stores. I'm not going to clown him, Kendrick thought. I'm going to help him. He didn't know yet that Marcus didn't need $3,500. He didn't know yet that Marcus owned the building Kendrick's branch operated out of. He didn't know yet that the man he pitied was the man who paid him. But he would. They all would. And when that moment arrived, it would arrive in a boardroom, under fluorescent lights, with 39 people in the room, and not a single one prepared for what they were about to see. Nothing in any of their lives would ever look quite the same again. Kendrick had rehearsed what he was going to say at least 14 times by the time he parked his car on North Avenue. He'd practiced in the bathroom mirror that morning. He'd practiced on the drive over, talking to himself like a man trying to convince a jury. He had even typed out a rough script on his notes app the night before, something that would offer help without embarrassing Marcus. Something that felt like friendship and not charity. Something that landed with dignity on both sides of the exchange. By the time he stepped out of his car and saw Marcus behind the cart blending a fresh batch of watermelon juice for a woman in scrubs who was clearly on her way to a hospital shift, Kendrick forgot every single rehearsed word. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just watching. Marcus moved behind that cart the way a chef moves in a kitchen that belongs to him. Unhurried, precise. He wiped the rim of the bottle before capping it. He said something that made the nurse laugh, a real laugh, not a polite one. He handed her the juice, waved off her attempt to overpay, and turned to the next customer before she had finished saying thank you. This man, Kendrick thought, doesn't look lost at all. But the thought passed quickly, because Kendrick had seen what the numbers looked like. He'd seen the cart, the chalkboard sign, the sneakers that, while clean, weren't new. He told himself that appearances could be maintained even when things had fallen apart. He'd seen it too many times, not to know that pride was the last thing a struggling man surrendered. He walked over. Marcus looked up mid-blend, saw Kendrick's face, and broke into a grin so immediate and genuine that it almost knocked Kendrick sideways. "Ken, what are you doing on this side of town, man?" He extended a fist across the cart. Kendrick dapped him up, feeling strangely underprepared. I was passing through." Marcus tilted his head. "You live in Decatur. I know where I live, Mark." Marcus laughed. "All right then. Pineapple ginger? Mango? I got a new soursop blend today. First batch of the week." "I'll take the soursop," Kendrick said. And then, before he could stop himself, before the 14 rehearsals could save him, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. He set it on the cart between them. "I want you to have this," he said quietly. "It's $3,400. I know it's not a lot, but it's enough to maybe get a commercial license. Approach a couple stores, man. Your juice is genuinely good. You could bottle this properly, get it on shelves somewhere." Marcus looked at the envelope, then he looked at Kendrick. Something shifted behind his eyes, not offense, not amusement, but something more layered than either. Something that looked almost like tenderness. "Ken," he said slowly, "don't make it weird. Just take it." "Ken, Mark, I'm not doing this for clout. I didn't even tell the group. Kendrick exhaled. "I see you out here every day working, and I know things happen to people. I know life moves in directions we don't plan for. And I'm not going to sit in a group chat laughing at my friend. That's not who I am." There was a pause, a long one. Traffic moved and honked around them. Someone asked the price of the mango juice, and Marcus held up one finger 1 second without breaking eye contact with Kendrick. Then Marcus picked up the envelope and held it in both hands for a moment, with the kind of care you give something that carries weight beyond its contents. "I'm going to give this back to you," he said, "but not because I don't appreciate it, because of what I'm about to show you." He served the mango customer, called over a young man named Trey who helped at the cart on busy mornings, handed him the blender controls with a few instructions, and then turned back to Kendrick. "You eaten?" "It's 9 in the morning. I know what time it is." "You eaten?" Kendrick blinked. "No." "Good. Ride with me." Marcus drove a gunmetal gray Honda Pilot, not because he couldn't afford otherwise. He simply liked it. It was reliable. It didn't attract the kind of attention that slowed a man down. And it had enough cargo space to transport a fully stocked cooler, a commercial blender, and 2 crates of fresh fruit without complaint. It was a practical man's car, and Marcus was, at his core, a practical man. Kendrick sat in the passenger seat trying to read the situation and failing entirely. They made small talk for the first few minutes, Morehouse memories, the way Atlanta had changed. A brief and mutually enthusiastic digression about a Braves game from 2 weeks prior. It felt easy in the way that real friendships feel easy, even after years of distance, like a song you know all the words to without trying. Then Marcus turned off the main road. They pulled into the parking structure of a building downtown, a sleek glass tower, on Marietta Street that Kendrick recognized vaguely as a corporate address he'd driven past 100 times without registering. Marcus pulled a key card from his sun visor, tapped it on a panel, and the gate lifted. He parked in a spot marked Reserved DW. Kendrick looked at the letters, then at Marcus. DW, Dion Williams. Marcus said it the same way he said everything simply, without performance. "Come on." The lobby was all dark marble and soft lighting. A security guard stood at the front desk, looked up, and nodded immediately. "Morning, Mr. Williams." "Morning, Charles. How's the baby?" 3 weeks old and running the household, sir." Marcus laughed. "It only gets worse." "Tell Yvonne I said congratulations again." Kendrick walked beside him in silence, his brain doing calculations it wasn't fully equipped to complete. They stepped into an elevator. Marcus pressed 31, the 31st floor. The doors opened into a reception area that stopped Kendrick mid-step. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the Atlanta skyline laid out like a reward. Clean lines, warm wood finishes, walls carrying framed logos, Pure Origin beverages. Dion Digital, Cornerstone Real Estate Group, Apex Auto Group. Kendrick's eyes stopped at the last one, his mouth opened. Nothing came out. A woman at the reception desk looked up. Good morning, Mr. Williams. You have the Pure Origin Quarterly Review at 11 and your 2 o'clock with the Apex Board has been confirmed. Thank you, Dana. Hold everything until then. He gestured for Kendrick to follow him and led him through a corridor into a corner office that looked like the kind of room where decisions that shaped cities were made. Marcus settled into his chair like a man who had been sitting in it for years because he had. Kendrick stood in the middle of the office, still holding the white envelope. Looking at the Apex Auto Group logo framed on the wall, the same logo on the lanyard badge he wore to work every single morning. Marcus, he said. His voice came out smaller than he intended. Sit down, Ken. He sat. How long? Was all he managed. Apex? I acquired it 4 years ago. Quietly. Through a holding company. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the desk, hands folded. I kept the existing management structure. Didn't want to disrupt what was working. And when I found out you and the others had landed there, he paused. I was happy for you. All of you. I wasn't going to take that from anyone. Kendrick stared at him. You've been our boss, technically. A small smile. Several layers removed. We were in a group chat. Kendrick stopped. His jaw tightened. We were laughing at you. I know. I didn't laugh. I know that too. The silence between them was different now. Heavier on one side than the other Kendrick's side. He looked down at the envelope in his hands, and something about holding $3,400 in a $340 million man's office hit him in a way that was almost unbearable. He set the envelope on the desk. Marcus slid it back across without hesitation. Keep it. Put it in your daughter's college fund. Kendrick's throat tightened. Why didn't you ever say anything? To any of us? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Outside the windows, Atlanta hummed and glittered and moved. Down on the street, 31 floors below, life was happening in all its noise and color. Because I didn't build any of this to prove something to people, he said finally. I built it because I love building. I go to that intersection every morning because I love people. I love the woman in scrubs who needs something real before a 12-hour shift. I love the old man 3 lights down selling papers in the cold. I love the feeling of handing someone something good that came from the ground fruit, water, effort. He paused. I don't need a title to feel like somebody, Ken. I already know who I am. Kendrick looked at his friend for a long time. Then he said very quietly, the others need to know. Marcus said nothing, not because they deserve it, but because Kendrick stopped, searched for the words. Because the way they talked about you, the way we talked about you, that's not okay. And if it doesn't get corrected, it just keeps going. And next time it won't be you. It'll be somebody who actually is struggling, and they'll do the same thing. Marcus studied him across the desk. The city spread out behind him like a painting. There's a board meeting, he said slowly. Apex Auto Group, full leadership review. All branch managers required to attend. His eyes didn't waver. Next Thursday. Kendrick understood immediately. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and for the first time since he'd walked up to that cart holding an envelope full of savings, he felt the ground settle solidly beneath him. I'll be there, he said. Marcus nodded once. I know. Thursday arrived the way consequential days always do, dressed like an ordinary one. The sky over Atlanta was a clean, unbothered blue. Traffic on I-285 moved with its usual indifference. Coffee was brewed, badges were clipped, elevators were ridden. Across 4 Apex Auto Group locations, branch managers and senior staff gathered their notebooks, straightened their ties, and made their way downtown to the Marietta Street Tower for what the company calendar described simply as Quarterly Leadership Review All Branches, Mandatory Attendance, Floor 31, 9 a.m. Deshaun arrived first from the Buckhead branch, sharp in a charcoal suit, already working his phone. He stepped into the lobby, nodded at the security guard, and rode the elevator up, making a mental note of talking points he wanted to raise about Q3 numbers. Jamal and Terrence came together from the Midtown branch, laughing about something from the parking garage. Brandon, who managed the West Atlanta location, arrived exactly on time, as he always did, punctual the way men are when they've been raised to treat lateness as disrespect. They filtered into the 31st floor conference room one by one, collecting coffee from a side table, finding seats, scanning the room with the mild curiosity of people who attended these reviews quarterly, and expected nothing outside the usual rhythm of projections, targets, and corporate encouragement. Kendrick arrived last. He took a seat at the far end of the table, set his portfolio down, and said nothing. When Deshaun caught his eye across the room and gave him the familiar nod, Kendrick returned it, quietly, evenly. He looked at the door. At exactly 9:04 a.m., Dana, the receptionist Kendrick, now understood differently than he had. 7 days ago, opened the conference room door and leaned in. "He's ready," she said to no one in particular and everyone at once. The room settled, chairs shifted, phones went face down. And then Marcus Dion Williams walked in. He wore a charcoal suit, fitted, clean, no tie. The top button of his white shirt opened just enough to show the simple gold chain that anyone who had bought juice from his cart on Peachtree Street would have recognized immediately. His locks were pulled back. His beard was shaped. He carried nothing but himself. He walked to the head of the table with the same unhurried ease he carried at the cart every morning and stood there for a moment, looking at the room. It took 4 seconds. 4 seconds for the faces to process, for the information to travel from the eyes to the brain to the chest, where it landed differently for each person depending on what they had done with it. Deshaun's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Jamal blinked. Once, twice. Terrence made a sound that was not quite a word. Brandon sat very, very still. Deshaun was the first to speak because Deshaun was always the first to speak. "Marcus?" His voice came out stripped of its usual confidence, small and genuinely confused, like a man who had walked into a room and found the furniture rearranged. "What are you? Why are you?" "Good morning," Marcus said. Calm. Warm. The same voice he used at the cart. "My name is Marcus Dion Williams. I am the founder and principal owner of Apex Auto Group, through my holding company, Dion Consolidated Enterprises. I also own Pure Origin Beverages, Dion Digital, and Cornerstone Real Estate Group." He paused, not for drama, but because what came next required its own space. "I have owned Apex Auto Group for 4 years. You have all worked for me for at least 2 of those." The silence that followed was the loudest thing any of them had ever heard in a corporate setting. Deshaun set his coffee down with the carefulness of a man suddenly aware of every movement he was making. "I want to be clear about why we're all here today," Marcus continued. He moved to the side of the table and pulled up a presentation on the screen. Clean slides, professional, the kind that communicated that what was happening was deliberate and had been planned long before any of them walked through the door. "We're here for the quarterly review, which will proceed as normal. Targets, projections, performance, all of it. But before we get there, I want to spend a few minutes on something more important." He clicked to the first slide. It was blank except for a single line of text. "What do you know about the people around you?" Marcus did not raise his voice once. He didn't need to. "Most of you know me from Morehouse," he said, leaning against the edge of the table, arms folded loosely. "We were close once. The kind of close that makes you think you know somebody fully. And I understand why you thought what you thought when you saw me at that intersection." He looked at each of them, not with accusation, but with the steady gaze of a man who had thought about this moment and decided exactly what he wanted to do with it. A man in a t-shirt behind a juice cart, no briefcase, no corner office visible, no signs that society typically uses to signal that a person matters. He clicked again. The next slide showed the Pure Origin logo. "I started selling juice on the street because I love it. Not because I had to. Because there is something about standing in the middle of real life, not behind glass, not above it, not separated from it by a title that keeps me honest." His voice carried no defensiveness. "I know what it feels like to need something and have someone look through you. I built my first business so I'd never have to feel that again. I go to that cart so I never forget what it felt like." Deshaun had not moved in 3 minutes. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on the table in front of him, with the focus of a man trying to contain something that was threatening to surface. "I'm not standing here to embarrass anyone," Marcus said, and he meant it. Everyone in the room felt it. "I'm standing here because I believe in what this company does, and I believe in the people running it. Your numbers are good. Your leadership has been solid. That doesn't change." He clicked forward again. "But I do want to leave you with something that has nothing to do with quarterly targets." The new slide read, "Your assumptions are not facts. The man selling juice in traffic might own the company you work for, Marcus said quietly. The woman cleaning the office at night might be putting herself through law school. The vendor on the corner might be funding his daughter's medical degree. The person you scroll past, the one you screenshot and send to a group chat, he let that sit for exactly one beat. They are full human beings whose entire existence does not fit inside the frame of the photo you took. Deshaun closed his eyes. It was a small movement. Nobody commented on it, but Kendrick, watching from the end of the table, saw it and saw the exact moment it landed. The quarterly review proceeded exactly as scheduled. Marcus ran it himself, which surprised people and then quickly didn't, because within 10 minutes it was clear he knew the numbers better than anyone in the room. He asked sharp questions. He remembered names of junior staff members at branches he'd apparently visited quietly, unannounced, more than once. He pushed back on one projection with such specific insight that Brandon, who had prepared the slide, sat back in his chair and nodded slowly. When it was over, the room emptied gradually, people filing out with the careful energy of those recalibrating in real time. Deshaun was the last to leave, or almost the last. He stood at the door for a moment and then turned back. Marcus was gathering his things at the head of the table. Kendrick sat nearby, giving them space without leaving it entirely. Mark. Deshaun's voice was stripped down to something genuine, no performance in it. I owe you an apology that I don't have the right words for yet. Marcus looked at him. The group chat, Deshaun stopped. Started again. I took that photo. I wrote that caption. I set the whole thing off and I thought it was, he exhaled sharply. I thought I was being funny. I didn't think about what I was actually doing to somebody I've known for 20 years. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, I know you didn't mean it to cut deep. That's almost worse, Deshaun said, that I didn't even think about it enough to know it would. Marcus nodded slowly. That's the part worth sitting with. Deshaun extended his hand. Marcus shook it firm, real, no performance on either side. Come by the cart sometime, Marcus said with the beginning of a smile. I'll blend you something. Deshaun let out a breath that carried more in it than a laugh. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I'll do that. He did come by the cart. They all did eventually. Not together separately, in their own time, in their own way. Jamal on a Tuesday, slightly awkward at first, and then genuinely moved when an elderly man shuffled up to the cart, and Marcus greeted him by name and asked about his granddaughter's recital. Terrence on a Wednesday, who stood to the side and watched for 10 minutes before saying a word, and left an hour later understanding something he hadn't been able to articulate before. Brandon brought his 9-year-old son, who thought Marcus was the coolest person he'd ever met and wanted to know if he could work the blender. The group chat went quieter after that. Not dead, but quieter. More considered. The screenshots of strangers stopped. The mockery dissolved the way things dissolve when they've been held up to better light. And Kendrick, who had walked up to that cart with an envelope of savings and walked out of an office a different man, never forgot the weight of what he'd been given. Not money, not information, but the lesson handed to him plainly and without cruelty that the truest things about people are almost never the first things you see. Marcus was at the cart the following Monday, 7:19 a.m., Peachtree and North Avenue. White t-shirt, fresh locks pulled back, gold chain catching the early light, watermelon mint, pineapple ginger, soursop if you're feeling bold. A young woman in a food delivery uniform pulled up on a bicycle. She'd been eyeing the cart for a week, always passing too quickly. Today she stopped. What's the cheapest one? $6. But hold on. Marcus looked at her, the uniform, the early hour, the look of someone mid-grind. He reached into the cooler and held out a watermelon mint. First one's on me. Consider it an investment. She looked at the bottle, then at him. Why? He smiled the way he always smiled, easy, unhurried, like a man with nothing to prove, and everything already settled. Because everybody deserves something good in the morning, he said. Doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter where you're standing. You matter the same. She took the bottle. She didn't know who he was. And that, to Marcus Dion Williams, was exactly the point. The end. The lesson this story leaves behind is simple, and it is this. Never let a person's position tell you their worth. Never let a uniform, a cart, a corner, or a caption be the whole story. Treat every soul you meet with the dignity you would want in return because you are almost never seeing the full picture. And sometimes, the person you're laughing at is the person holding the door open to your future.